Hi, everybody. Welcome to the latest episode of Tell Me More, a hospitality data podcast. Do not be alarmed by the fact that Stephanie Ricca's voice has suddenly dropped a couple of octaves because I am not Stephanie Ricca. I am your sometimes substitute teacher, Sean McCrankin, news editor here for Hotel News Now, here with STR's Isaac Collazo and CoStar's Jan Freitag. Guys, how you doing today?
Doing well, but I was getting really concerned, Sean. It's like, what happened to Steph?
She's also, you guys have the video, listeners do not. I'd be more concerned about the beard than the voice. But
I was like, Sean, I know Steph, and you're not Steph.
yeah, in many ways, I am reminded of this working next to her every day. I am not Steph Ricca. All right, guys, so let's get right into it. June, a pretty pivotal month for the hotel industry. Isaac, what are we seeing in the numbers?
Yeah, we'll go through the numbers and give you a quick update. June RevPAR increased by 1.5%, and that was after a 4% increase in May and a 2% increase in April. Now, what I thought was interesting about the whole quarter is that we saw RevPAR rise to 1.4%. And why is that striking to me? Because at the end of the first quarter, year-to-date RevPAR was only 0.1%. So it kind of underscores how strong this quarter was. April was easy to expect, right? Because it was the Easter shift. May was kind of a surprise. June, it's actually more normal, if there's such a word as normal for this kind of stuff. And so that was interesting. If you look at this chain scales, you see evidence of bifurcation still. And so you can look at the RevPARs, and the RevPARs range from 3.2% year to date in upper upscale to minus 4.2% in economy. So, I mean, again, very much bifurcated still. What was interesting is just lots of movements within the chain scales. So even though economy is down 4.2% a year to date, let's go back. At the first quarter, it was down 6.8% RevPAR. So, and then it only fell 2% in the second quarter. So there is a comeback there as well. I thought another interesting one to look at was luxury. Luxury was down 1.4% in the first quarter, but grew 2% in the second quarter. So it's now positive at 0.3%. In terms of demand, again, the same kind of thing. Demand had fallen for a full year, full 12 months. It was actually, I should say different. It was flat to down for a full 12 months. There was 1 month where it was 0% growth. And in the first quarter, it was down the most, down 1.3% of any quarter of the past year. But second quarter, up 1.4%. So again, a quick turnaround. But even when you look at that demand and you break it down by month and you break it down by chain scale, what struck me is economy was still down. Even though it turned around, I told you the RevPAR turned around. There was some betterness, or better. Is that a word, betterness? I don't know, but I just made it up.
Improvement.
But it's still, demand was down. I like betterness. It's better. That could be better. It could be an advertising slogan.
So you're saying betterness is an improvement on the language.
Exactly. I think it is. And in terms of demand, we were looking at group demand. We've been talking about group demand. Jan and I have been talking about group demand. What I thought was interesting in June, I didn't do this by quarter, actually did it by month. June basically matched last year. So we didn't see an improvement there. The improvements that we saw in the second quarter for group demand was really in April, where it actually surpassed 2019, but that was easy comps, right? Because of Easter. And then in May, it didn't surpass 2019, but was better than 2023. In terms of occupancy, the year-to-date number for the US is at 62.6. That is actually down from a year ago. So it's down 30 basis points. And we're still 300 basis points lower than we were June year-to-date of 2019. The biggest gaps are still luxury and upper upscale, where against 2019, there are more than 570 basis points below that. So again, even though we have a bifurcated performance and it's growing on the upper end, there's still significant gaps there. And that's something just to keep watching. And then in terms of weekdays, what I thought was really interesting is the weekdays were exactly the same in terms of occupancy to a year ago at 62.5%. So it didn't move, even though because it's only been the top 25 that's really been growing weekdays. So that kind of the other markets kind of put a little drag, but it kept it flat. So at least the top 25 offset the drag there. And then finally, just to finish this off, looking at ADR. Again, ADR, what was surprising to me, and then we can talk about this, Jan, is demand grew. We saw that big turnaround from being negative in the first quarter and negative for the past 4 quarters, big turnaround in second quarter, positive 1.4%, but ADR growth actually dropped. So in the first quarter it was up 2%, but in the second quarter, it only grew by 1.6%. And Jan and I were texting last night. Yes, we actually text. We do like each other. And he sent a text regarding Pebblebrook. And Pebblebrook's earnings release basically showed kind of the same idea that ADRs are still under pressure, if I remember correctly from our text last. It was late. And so it was very late. And so I think that's the recap. There's really there's so many moving pieces, but again, that's the highlights, I think, of the industry performance in June and second quarter.
Yeah, Jan, what's your take on the numbers for the month?
Yeah, thank you, Isaac. That's a really good deep dive into the monthly and the year-to-date data. To me, I come back to a couple of themes. The first one is the saving grace continues to be the lack of supply growth. Right, we are in June up 0.5%, year to date up 0.5%. So that really helped us in June to get occupancy basically flat growth with a year ago. As demand and supply growth are in equilibrium, it's not a great number, but it's because supply growth is so low, it allows us to really grow demand a little bit, and that gets us to flat occupancy. So that, I think, continues to be a really good theme. The question is the pipeline going to accelerate? Are we going to see a surge in new supply? And we don't see this on our horizon this year or honestly next year. There are some markets, New York, Phoenix, Nashville, that are outliers. But in general, we see the number of rooms in construction is still below 160,000 rooms. It's been between 150,000 and 160,000 now for, I don't know, 8 quarters or something, for a long time. It grew 5.5%, but I think that's just a seasonal variation. So new supply or supply growth continues to be really helpful to the existing hoteliers if you are outside of one of those large growth markets.
The only thing I would say is that we are seeing, again, it's really low growth versus historical standards, but upper mid-scale did see growth of near 1.6, 1.7% supply growth, and they actually saw occupancy decline year over year. And so there are still some sectors of our industry where supply growth is not significant, but maybe making an impact along with some slower demand growth. And so I think it's something to watch. I thought it was also interesting that supply went negative for mid-scale and economy, and both those segments not also lost occupancy year over year. So again, even though supply is not an issue, again, there is the demand side continues to be a little soft for me on certain chain scales.
Yeah, and what your data suggests is if you have a little bit of upper mid-scale supply growth, that's really where you can get something done with an existing sponsor, with an existing banking relationship, if you're willing to pay pretty high construction interest rates, with the understanding that once you open, hopefully the interest rate environment is going to be a little bit easier. So some people are indeed breaking ground and then opening up. My other comment is about rate growth, specifically on the group side. I've just been continuing to be fascinated by this really stout, is that a word? Healthy increase in ADR growth for groups year to date, up 4%. In June, it was also up 4%. Yeah, there are probably some seasonalities in there, but it's just interesting to see that as we get more people on the road, as we get more internal meetings or external meetings, that there's pricing power for hoteliers. I will touch on the group piece in a little bit later on in my segment, but that's just an interesting number to call out because that contrasts with transient ADR down, I'll call that flat, down 0.4%, flat basically year to date, year over year. So group up year to date, 4, transient flat on the ADR side.
All right. So Jan, what's your interesting takeaway for the month? What do you think? What's been drilling a hole in your head this month?
Are we drilling holes in Jan's head?
Don't
I
drill.
mean,
To steal a line from another podcast, don't drill a hole.
is
in
that a
your head.
game?
Security.
So what's the topic?
I was hoping to just talk about data. So our friends from Deloitte came up with their 2024 corporate travel study, and there were just a couple of charts and data points in there that I thought were fascinating. They interviewed basically 100 travel managers and 1,800 frequent travelers, and they just asked, hey, in 2024 compared to 2023, are you traveling more or less or the same? And over half, 51%, about half basically said we are going to travel more this year. 13% said less, and 35% said the same. But that 50% of travel managers said yes, we are having more people on the road. I think that bodes well. And then they asked specifically, what are you doing? Why are you traveling more? And the two highest answers were 65% higher participation at events. And the second one was, and I thought this was really interesting, 62% said client demand for in-person meeting. So point, I think, is we are all teamed out. We are all Zoomed out. We are all Skyped out. And 3-4 years into it, people are like, look, let's just get together and do this in person. And then the other piece, when they asked the travel managers, where do you have more trips in 24 versus 2023? And they have a whole host of reasons why people would travel. And the two areas where travel managers are proposing growth, more trips this year than last year, was training, learning, and development, and team meetings. So it's clearly internally focused. So you can read this two ways. You could say, on the one hand, okay, internal meetings, if it's part of the motivational package to keep your people engaged, you're probably going to go to a nicer hotel. You're probably going to have a nicer F&B outing.
Yeah.
The opposite of that, though, is, and I've said this in many presentations, when things slow down on the top line, if GDP slows, if the company's profits margins shrink, training and internal team meetings are the first thing that gets cut. Yeah. So while I see the growth numbers here and the travel managers are saying, yes, this is good, I just always have this little cautionary tone in the back of my head. And then lastly, just one quick data point, which I just thought was hysterical. So they, of course, when you're a corporate travel manager, you have a corporate booking tool, and you want your people to use that corporate booking tool so you can keep track of where they are and you get the discounts in the system. And of course, there's always been this conversation about people booking outside of that booking tool, going rogue, so to speak. And I had always assumed that this is an age-related thing, that this is the Gen Z millennial traveler who's saying, no, I know best, I got this, and not worry about the corporate tool. But here's the quote. Older travelers are more likely to say they never use company channels. Age is a much stronger predictor of booking compliance than travel frequency. Okay, boomer. So they're saying,
you know what? That's not the least bit surprising to me, because you know what? It's actually the opposite. The Gen Z, the younger millennial, grew up in the environment where travel was managed through technology. So this is the way they learned to do it. So they exist in that environment. Older traveler used to be more like, you go and you handle your travel, right? You bring back your receipts. Am I wrong on this?
No, I agree with you, Sean. I agree. Back in my day, Sean and Jan, I'm getting really mixed up. But I agree. I think you're right. I think it's because experience comes into play, and sometimes you find better deals. And I think that some of that older travelers going outside the grouping channels is because they think they can get a better deal. I think that's part of it. And that I have a favorite hotel that I'm going to stay at, so I'd rather stay at that hotel because I know that hotel.
My argument was that these people have been in a corporate environment for so long. By now, they should know that their company has a booking tool. I was floored that it says that they are more likely to never use a company.
Well, they're just what
They're
people
also
say and do are two different things. It's just a survey.
But functionally, they'd be more senior employees, right? They'd have a little more latitude, like on average. Well,
it's not entitlement.
I'm not saying that.
I think some of it is that they know what their caps are, their hotel caps. A lot of companies, so they stay within they may go outside the booking tool of the group meeting, because anyway, those tend to be outside of, for example, even here with CoStar STR, if we're going to a meeting, the group tour, a booking tool is outside of Concur or anything we use. So I think that's why. I'm going to add just one last thing to the meeting piece before we go on to my topic. And this came out of Destinations International. I had a team member at Destinations International last week at their meeting, and it said people in the meetings industry are generally optimistic about the next 6 months, although there was a major meetings company that mentioned seeing some softness in specific industries, including healthcare and government. And that they said that softness is due to smaller budgets for meetings. And there was also a general anxiousness due to economic and political factors among financial industries. And one of the advice they said was meeting planners are more willing to be flexible with dates, and that this may extend the conference and convention season in a similar way that leisure travel season has been extended. So I thought that was an interesting comment from one of my team members who happened to be at that meeting.
So the data I was referring to is the 2024 Deloitte Corporate Travel Study. So check it out. Thanks.
And I was going to say that was just going to be fun, but you have friends? Sorry.
All right. Well, now we're just getting mean.
We are.
We're all friends here.
We're all friends. Exactly.
Isaac, what is your topic of the month?
My topic is not going to be as extensive as Jan's, but it's something I've been thinking about. And one of the things I was thinking about, and actually yesterday I started doing some analysis, just some back of the envelope analysis. My thought was, are we seeing more volatility in the week-to-week performance of the hospitality data? And so I just started thinking about it because, 1 week it's negative, next week it's up 10%. And it's just, to me, it seemed very volatile. So just back of the envelope, looking at week over week, I went back to 2023, 2022, 2019, and obviously 24. There's only 29 weeks of the year so far. Well, what I found in this simple calculation that 2024 is no more volatile than 2019 was. In fact, it's actually less volatile based on the way I did the analysis. That was surprising to me because, again, what I'm seeing right now is just a lot of movement in the data. Every time I think I know what's going to happen, it seems to go the opposite. So I thought that was just an interesting thing to think about is this, the industry is behaving like it should. And it's all, events are a major driver of the industry. Weather is a major driver, obviously holidays. And so, it's no more volatile than it has been, especially to our benchmark year of 2019. So
I give you a lot of credit, right? You have a hunch and you're like, this feels crazy. The data is all over the place. But rather than saying the data is all over the place, we have the ability to go back and actually study and saying, you know what, 2019 was pretty crazy too, or therefore, 2024 is pretty normal. I appreciate that. We all have recency biases, and especially like the week after July 4th, the week before July 4th, you're like, wow, what's going on with these swings? Well, that's actually the standard swing. So I think this is really good content or comment for our listeners to say.
Hopefully good content too.
But take a deep breath. It's not as extreme as it feels. We have been here before.
Yeah, what's interesting, just FYI, for those of you that are tracking the industry, after, obviously this year we had a leap year. 2019 did not have a leap year, or a leap day, sorry. But after beginning in April, or it could have been March too, the calendars are lined up. Literally, you can look at like 2019 and 2024 in terms of the week.
Okay.
And the holidays, other than religious holidays, the major holidays line up. So we've been using that just as a barometer, like what's happening with our industry. Does this make sense? And so, but that's, it's fun. It's fun to look at data. It's fun to play with data, as they say.
You know what? I think I'm actually qualified to weigh in on this topic because obviously way less of an expert with the numbers than you guys are. But a big part of my job is keeping track of the vibes of the industry. And I will say the important context here is the vibes back in 2019, even though we look back at it, for years and years as the benchmark, and people said that, historically great year if you just look at the numbers. The vibes in 2019 were terrible because everybody said we were stuck in the mud. Like that was the perception in 2019 is that we were so even keel that nobody has any hopes for, not no hopes, but like, in Wall Street, there was no growth story, right? Like it is what it is, to the point that people were openly rooting for a recession to kind of reset the feeling. And the fact that that year was more volatile than this year is really interesting.
What's interesting, Sean, just to give you some background and to our listeners, again, RevPAR year to date in 2019 was 1%. We're at 1.4%.
Yeah.
And it had come down from a 3.9 in 2018. And again, 2018 would have been the highest occupancy the industry year to date and a full year had ever seen. So it was a nervous vibe. If people are like, what's going on? What's wrong? There's a recession coming. We didn't know there wasn't a recession. There was something worse.
Yeah. Be careful what you wish for. Yeah.
Yeah, exactly.
All right, guys. So now we get to my question, which luckily I don't have to provide an answer to. I just put you guys on the spot to answer. But within the context of when we're recording this, and obviously we'll be publishing pretty quick order here, but the day we're sitting to record this, Southwest Airlines has made the announcement that they're making a pretty tectonic shift and how they approach travel after decades and decades of being the airline that gives you open seating. They're now going to charge for premium seating. Who knows how that's going to filter down, whether that means no open seating, whether that just means you can pay for the seat in the front or the best seat on the airplane, which is always the one that has no seat in front of it. I just want to get the take from you guys. What do you think is the hotel industry equivalent of that? And you can take that in any direction you see fit. Isaac, why don't you go ahead and jump in?
There is a hotel equivalent. I think, first of all, just to comment on what they're doing, putting my marketing hat on, they're taking the friction out of travel, right? All of us are very anxious when we get on planes. At least I am, especially when you're flying Southwest. You want, am I going to get the seat? Am I going to get an aisle seat, right? How far in the back am I going to be? Who's going to be next to me? Although even assigning seats, you won't know who's going to be next to you. But what they're doing is, I think, actually makes sense. It takes some of that anxiety of flying away, especially on Southwest. There's always anxiety with flying. Will I get overhead? There's always, will I get to the airport on time? But this kind of removes that a bit. So I applaud them for that, because that'll make me less anxious about getting that A grouping, boarding group. I think the equivalent for that in the industry would be Hilton, where you can pick your room, right? So where your room is. You're not freaking out. If I don't want to be by an elevator or the ice machine or whatever you don't like, you can pick your room, or if you want a high floor, low floor, because people have preferences. And I think that's the equivalent. I think it makes sense. Again, it takes out the anxiety. That's or the anxiousness we have when we travel. Even all of us that have traveled for years, decades, you're always anxious about, like, where's my room going to be?
So interesting, right? Isaac and I travel a lot, and we are very similar. We're not what they would call like a really relaxed, awesome traveler. I so sympathize with you, Isaac, and we do this almost every week, so we're just sort of crazy. I can't fault Southwest for looking at the Delta and United and American earnings calls and saying, oh, there's gold in them hills, and the hills are up front, so to speak, like the premium seating, that's where the real money is. So let us just figure out if we can get indeed more people to pay for selecting a seat that's probably going to be up front. I wonder if they're going to change their seat configuration on the front, because obviously there are fewer seats in the first 3 or 4 rows.
I think they've confirmed that this won't go into effect until next year because they're going to reconfigure. So I think that's been confirmed.
So then they are just like any other airline, basically. I've always liked open seating. Honestly, I never had any problems with it. Traveling with kids or so, I thought it was always a very, very easy way to do it. But I'm also happy to pay extra when I travel for CoStar to get that seat. That has that. I like the window, so you can have the aisle all day.
Yeah.
I want the window.
I'm an aisle seat.
Like I said, whenever I fly Southwest, which is only to Nashville, whenever I fly Southwest, my only hope is that I get on that plane and that one magical seat in the exit row that has no seat in front of it. If no one's sitting there, I'm like, I will just bowl people over to get there because that is the game changer.
And
I would pay money to guarantee that seat, which is the point. I would pay money if I could say I could for sure sit in that seat.
My PSA is, I can't see. Sean, take off your backpack because I'm at the aisle seat. And when you turn around because you're running to your seat, you're hitting the hell out of me. So please take off your backpack.
I am that guy for sure. My spatial awareness is terrible.
Yeah, you are indeed taking the only first class seat on Southwest. It's that seat. It's that seat in the exit row that doesn't have a seat.
I love that seat.
All right, guys, we'll close this out with another topical one. So this week is the start of the Olympics, and we're going to go out on a metaphor for the industry. And right now, let's do our best to make the metaphor Olympics related. Isaac, you got the first crack in the last one. Jan, what's your Olympics metaphor?
So I think synchronized swimming comes to mind, where it's very graceful on the top and total chaos underwater where the guests don't see it. I think that is true for hotel operations. It is sometimes true for data processing. It is sometimes true for deal making. So to me, the metaphor that sort of holds up well is synchronized swimming.
It is a true metaphor for data. For those of you attending Hotel Data Conference, HCC, in 2 weeks, yes, we're crazily trying. We are swimming chaos right now.
Yes. Calm and collected and synchronized above the surface.
Exactly right.
Everybody who's at HCC in a couple of weeks understand that, yes, that metaphor holds true for the entirety of the conference. Hopefully it looks perfectly coordinated and wonderful to you on the surface level, and just know that right under that surface, it's insanity in every direction.
Exactly. And for me, Sean and Jan, I go back to music. That my thing is music. We're less than a week away from Lollapalooza, so I am already geared up for that. Yes, just before HDC, which is bad timing for Lollapalooza. Can we move it back a week, please?
Well, more than a week, right?
Yeah, it starts on next Wednesday, right? And I come back Monday, and then we start the following Wednesday. So,
You meant move HTC back a week. I thought you were saying move Lollapalooza back a week and then counter program them.
Oh no, not counter program. I mean, I guess move it forward, more into July, less into August.
Yes, there you go.
Mine again, it goes back to 1980. For those that remember the Olympics, the Winter Olympics in Lake Placid, there was a jazz trumpet player by the name of Chuck Mangione. He wrote the greatest theme song next to John Williams. Of course, John Williams is fantastic, but it's called Give It All You Got. And I think that's a great metaphor for both the Olympics as well as the industry. So it all makes sense. So give it all you got.
So just so all listeners know, I came up with a metaphor as an example for these guys before we recorded that I thought was fantastic and went over at like a lead balloon with Jan. It was RevPAR is like rugby sevens, where it's not as robust as you're used to, but there's a lot of room to move there. But Jan was like, yeah, whatever. I don't know what that means.
Yeah, you don't have a video right now, but I still have a very puzzled look on my face.
All right. So the next time you guys sit down to record won't be with me, obviously, but it will be in Nashville at HDC for the first ever live episode of Tell Me More. Sadly, to anybody listening, if you don't already have a ticket to HDC, we are sold out. But keep this in mind for next year, when we hopefully do it again. And I believe I will have to double check this. I believe that we'll be able to post that episode, not immediately after the recording like we usually try to do, but within short order so that the data is not stale by the time it is published. But guys, thanks for the time. I think we got a lot of useful takeaways. Have a good one.
Great. Thanks, Sean.
Thank you. See you next time. Bye.
Hi, Hi, I'm Davon Reed.
I'm Omari Head.
And I'm Chris Henry.
We're the hosts of the Next Gen and Lodging podcast on the Hotel News Now podcast network. It's a monthly show in which we interview a new generation of hoteliers to get their insights into a variety of disciplines and topics, from finance to food and beverage and hotel operations. Listen to us on Spotify, Google, Apple Podcasts, or wherever you get your podcasts.
This episode of Tell Me More was recorded on July 25th, 2024, and edited by me, Sean McCracken. Thanks for listening, and visit hotelnewsnow.com for the latest industry news every day.